Hello, I'm John Paul and I'm here at Rimmer Brothers today to fit some side steps onto this Range Rover 2009 L322. Before we start to fit the side steps, we do have to find out the locating bolts. So there's two in the sill, one in the chassis, and the same at the rear as well, two in the sill, one in the chassis. There are M8s into the chassis and M6s into the sill. So it's best idea really is just spray a little bit of lube into all of the holes, and then if you've got a tap, just run a tap up just to clean the threads out. So when you're fitting your new bolts, it's nice and easy, and it's not really an issue, because they will have some rust in there. Even if they've still got the little covers on, they will still be rusty. So clean them up, and then I would, just before you even attempt to fit these steps, just run the bolts in to make sure they're nice and free. Clean up the M6 ones as well, front and rear, and then we're ready to fit the step. We've put a couple of the M6 mounting bolts in, one in the front and one in the rear, because as you can see, they've got the elongated holes, so you can pop the side step over the bolt and then slide it along so it holds in place, so you don't have to hold the step up and fit the bolt at the same time. So once that bolt's in, slide it up over the bolt and then slide it forward so it holds it all in place, and then you can do the same at the rear, and then we can put the other bolt in and tighten it up. I've put the four M6 bolts in loose, the ones that go through the steps and into the sill. So whilst they're loose, we need to put the M8 bolts into the chassis now, so just to make sure you can line everything up. So just get those two started, one at the front and one at the rear. Now leave everything loose, because the next job we're going to do is take off the front mud flap and the panel so we can mount the front bracket and the new mud flap for the front. It's now time to take the front mud flap off. 3 Phillips screws, 2 on the side and 1 underneath. I mean, will be fairly tight, so try and use as good a Phillips screwdriver as you can, or like I have, a little ratchet with a Phillips head inside. So then they are tight, so try to push on them, but they do go only into plastic, but they do get fairly well corroded just because of where they are. So just them 3 screws out, the mud flap's off, and then we're just going to remove this lower panel here, which I'll show you in a moment. And with the mud flap out of the way, we're just going to remove this lower panel. So use an M8 8mm spanner. That's just a little bolt, if you can see under there. Just have to get on there and just be careful with it, because it's tight, and try not to round it off. There we go. And just under that, a few turns, and then you'll be able to just pull this panel towards you, off its clips. Just be careful. There, comes off its clip, so 2 little clips there, 2 clips there, so that panel's off. Now we're going to have to take this bracket off here and replace it with the new one that's in the kit. Now we're going to change the bracket for the mud flap. It's just 2 M6 bolts, so they are nut and bolts, so you will have to get a spanner behind on the nut, then undo them, and then once they're off, bolt the new one using the new bolts in the kit. Here's the new bracket, so it's just a case of placing it back in line with the 2 holes, and then putting nut and bolts back in, a washer on the back, and then your nuts, and then just tighten them up. Simple as that. With the bracket back in place, we're just going to fit your new speed clips to the bracket so that you can screw your mud flaps to it. Then it's a case of popping the corner bracket back on. Fairly simple, pops into place, clips in, and then your 8mm spanner through the top, just tighten it up again, and once that's done, we'll pop the mud flap back on. Now it's just time to replace the mud flap, so it's a case of just pulling the little flaps back, mounting it in place. You'll see how it fits onto the side step like that. So then once those are back in place, you can put your self tappers back in there and then tighten it back up. And then also there's one little rubber grommet that goes in the bottom there, and it fits in the end of the side step, which you'll see the hole that pushes into, and it just basically pushes in and then pushes it in so it's nice and tight. That's the mud flap in place loosely. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back underneath, tighten up all the mounting bolts, make sure it all looks right and everything looks the right levels, come back, tighten up the mud flap fully, make sure it sits nicely onto the step, put your rubber grommet in, and then we'll do the other side, which is exactly the same but obviously on the other side.